Welcome back. It's Rick with the Ingrain Workshop, and in today's video we're going to be installing a barn door to cover up our roll-up door. We're also going to be installing 2 faux columns to conceal a water pipe and an air pipe, and then we're also going to be building an electrical chase. The significance of this project is that it will complete the shop renovation project. Thank God, the whole shop is now fully renovated, so let's get started. So I'm going to break this project up into 3 different phases. The first phase will be the electrical chase. The second phase will be the faux columns that get installed on each side of the roll-up door. And then the third phase will be the roll-up door cover. And I guess there's 4 phases. The 4th phase will be the actual barn door that covers up the roll-up doors. So here I'm just ripping down some 2x4s to the depth of my electrical panel. And those will go on each side of my electrical panel and give me something to screw the T111 siding to. Here's the bottom of the electrical chase, and you can see I've installed the 2x on both sides of the electrical panel up to about the top of the panel, and now I've got to extend that all the way up to the ceiling. Now I'm coming back, I've got the T111 siding cut to fit on the bottom half of the electrical chase. And so now I'm just going to go down here and pop in some screws and get this screwed in. The 2x are also going to allow me something to nail to when I come back and trim out the T111 siding with the stained 1x4s. You can see the bottom half of the electrical chase is now complete, and I still have the top half, which is where all the branch circuit and Romex wiring leave the panel and go up through the ceiling. Now, someone smart, and that's definitely not me, probably would have installed some sort of sheet metal or something behind this piece of T111 siding, just so in the future if anyone ever tried to nail something, it wouldn't puncture any of the Romex. But like I said, that's not me, but I know it's there, so I'll be cognizant about nailing or hanging anything in this area. And even when I go back and install the trim, I'll make sure that I'm nailing into my 2x4 or 2x framing versus just into the T111 siding and potentially hitting the Romex. So with the T111 siding installed, the next thing to do is to stain the siding. And I'm going to use Golden Pecan, which is what I've been using on this entire renovation project if you haven't been following along. And you can see the difference between the natural T111 siding and then the stained T111 siding. Now keep in mind, this stain is just rolled on and it's going to go on a really orange color, but the T111 siding soaks it up so much that it will blend in with the other 2 walls. So you can see how much darker it is when you put it on, but it will soak up and should eventually match the 2 other walls. You can see here the next day the stains dried and the chase matches the other 2 walls identically. So now I'm taking the 1x4, which I believe I stained a special walnut color. I'm going to go ahead and install the first piece of trim, which is going to run along the left side of the chase and basically just covers up the 2x framing that I used to frame out the chase. Next, I need to rip down the 1x4 trim that's going to go on the face of the chase. I believe I ripped them down to 2.5 inches, maybe 2 3/4, just so they could fit on either side of the electrical panel. I could have used the full 1x4 piece and just cut out just around the electrical panel, but I thought aesthetically it just looked better ripping it at 2.5 or 2 3/4 and running that all the way up. So here I'm going to be installing the face trim on the right side of the electrical chase, and you'll see that I'm being very careful up here at the top to make sure as I'm shooting in these nails to make sure that I'm nailing into the 2x framing, just so I make sure I don't hit any of the Romex. Down at the bottom of the panel, I believe everything's in PVC conduit, and that's where the service entrance comes into the workshop. You don't have to worry about it as much down there, but you definitely have to pay attention to it at the top of the electrical chase. Now at the top of these trim pieces, I had to cut them at an angle to match the ceiling angle, which was 13 degrees. So the trim on both the left and right side of the chases are cut at a 13-degree angle at the top of the trim, and that ties it in with the ceiling. So with the 2 vertical pieces of face trim done, it's time to do the 2 horizontal pieces. I'm going to put one here over the top of the panel and then another one at the bottom of the panel. I am using about a 1/16 inch space between the actual trim and the face of the electrical panel. This will give me enough room in the future if I do need to take the electrical panel out. I've got enough space to do that. And then I've got to come back and put the trim at the top and then the trim at the bottom. And then that pretty much will complete phase 1 of this project, which is the installation of the electrical chase. Okay, so now what I've done is I've completed the electrical chase, so it's 100% complete. The next project I'm going to be starting on is the box that's going to cover up the roll-up door. I'm going to start, I went ahead and cut 2 pieces at 68 inches, and then I cut 2 pieces at 20 inches, and this is going to be the frame for the top of the box. So let me get those screwed together. So here I'm just going to use some 2.5 inch drywall screws. You do have to be very careful when you're using 2x3 framing pieces, because they do have a tendency to split. I didn't take the time to pre-drill the holes. Probably should have. I think on the very last one the wood did split on me a little bit here. But again, I don't think it's a big deal because it's just a cover to cover up the roll-up door. Okay, the top of the frame is now complete. I did add 2 20-inch studs on the inside, and I put those at 24 inches on center. So now the top of the roll-up door box is complete, and the next thing I'm going to do is work on the bottom. Okay, now I have the bottom framed up. It's 100% complete. The only difference between the bottom and the top is that the bottom is only 15 inches wide and the top is 20 inches wide. And the reason for that is so the roll-up door can slide past the bottom. So the top will be attached to the wall and the bottom will not be attached to the wall, which will allow for the roll-up door to roll up into. Now that we have the top and bottom done, we're now going to take and make the studs. And we're going to make those at 20 inches. So the top and bottoms, there'll be a 20-inch space between the top and bottom, and that will basically encapsulate the roll-up portion of the door when it's in the fully open position. Okay, I've cut my studs at 20 inches and at 25 inches. So now I have to fasten them together. So what I've done is I've marked down from the end on the 25-inch stud 2.5 inches, and then I marked at the other end down 2.5 inches from that end, and then I'm going to install the 20-inch stud on top of the 25-inch stud, and then we'll install those studs onto the top and bottom frames. By using a 20-inch stud and a 25-inch stud here, what I'm basically doing is creating a ledge for the top and bottom of the frames to sit on, and it just makes for a more structurally sound box, and will hold up onto the wall a little bit easier, and just makes the overall structure more secure. Okay, so here I've just dry fitted the studs, and you can kind of see how it's going to work. Now, the open side is going to be the side that's going to be nailed directly to the wall, which will allow for the roll-up door to roll up under. I'm still going to have to put 2 studs on each end to tie the back side of the bottom frame and the top frame together. So, but pretty much all the other studs are where they're going to be. Again, I've just dry fit it for right now to see how it's all going to fit in place, and then I'll screw those in and then go back and screw the 2 end studs together, and then I should be ready to hang it on the wall. Okay, so I've got the first half of the roll-up door box frame in place. You can see it there. I just did it this way just so I could easily get it up there. I did have to get the assistance of my youngest son to help me get it up there, but then we screwed it to the metal studs, and it seems pretty secure. So I'm happy with it. The next thing I'm going to do is make the second box, get it up there, and then I'll come back and install T111 siding around the outside, and then it should be ready to just be trimmed out. For the second half of the roll-up door cover, I enlisted the help of my oldest son, Lorcan, and you can see here it's just a matter of getting it in place, using the ladder just to support it, and then once we get it aligned, I can take some metal screws. I've got metal studs and wood studs to screw into, and I think it definitely helps having the metal studs to be able to screw in. That way you know that this cover isn't going to go anywhere. So he was a big help, and we got it aligned up and got it screwed to the wall. Okay, so now that I've got the roll-up door cover framed, I needed to find a way to install the 2-inch rigid insulation. If you watched my wall prep video, I'll leave a link to the description of that video here. I used these angle brackets, these metal angle brackets, to fasten 2x4 studs in the walls. Then I went back and put the rigid insulation between the studs. Well, I've decided to use these L brackets just as a support that I could push the rigid insulation up against to, but it's not going to go all the way through the frame. So once I install the 2-inch insulation, I can just push it up flush to these L brackets, and that's as far as they'll go. So let me show you on the frame what it looks like. So these are the L brackets that I installed. So now when I install the 2-inch rigid insulation, it'll just go up against the back here and it won't push all the way through the frame. And I've installed these brackets all on the front of the cover, and then also on the tops. Now on the tops I had to put one on every side because I'm going to take and just lay the 2-inch insulation in the square, and then just let it sit on top of the 4 angle brackets. And then I can come back and put the T111 siding on top of the insulation. So I did that all the way down on the top. So in every box on the top, there's 4 angle clips, and then along the front at every box, there's 2 angle clips. And then on the bottom, there won't be any angle clips because the T111 siding will hold the rigid insulation in place at the bottom. Now I'm going to start cutting the insulation. This is my preferred method. It's just a jigsaw with a reverse tooth blade on it, and then just score the back. I've got a whole video on installing the insulation in the metal building, and I'll leave a link to the description. And then I'm just going to go ahead and insulate the entire roll-up box and start installing the T111 siding on the exterior of it. Once I wrapped the roll-up door with the T111 siding, then I started to go back and stain it with the Minwax Golden Pecan, again keeping with the theme of the entire workshop renovation. Once it was stained, I went back and started installing the 1x4 trim around the entire box, just like I did with the electrical chase, just to wrap it and trim it out and clean up all the exposed edges. Now it's time to start phase 3 of this project, and that's the faux columns. So I'm going to take a 2x6 and just rip it down to an actual 4-inch wide board, and I'm going to use that to install next to the overhead door track, and this will give me a nailer to actually fasten the faux column to. Okay, so before we install the faux columns, I have to install a nailer or something secure to the wall that we can nail the faux columns to. So what I did is I ripped down a 2x6 to a dimension of 2x4, actual dimensions for 4 inches. I couldn't use a 2x4 because it's only 3.5 inches. So I ripped down a 2x6 to 4 inches, and then I installed it next to the steel frame that is the track for the roll-up door. So I went ahead and drilled holes through the steel, and now I'm going back using 1/4 inch by 20 by 2 inch long bolts with a 1.25 inch flat washer and a nut to secure the 2x4 nailer to the actual frame of the roll-up door. And then once I get those installed, I can install the faux column beam to this nailer, and I can just screw the faux column directly to this nailer. So let me show you what I've done. So you can see the 1/4 inch bolts and the flat washers going all the way up the inside of the track. Now that's not going to interfere with the track or the roll-up door, and I put them approximately every 12 inches on center. So this is on the inside of the roll-up frame, and then on the outside I just have an 1.25 inch flat washer and the actual nut, and that sandwiched to the steel frame of the roll-up door is plenty secure for me to have something now to nail the faux column to. And so as you can see, the nailer goes from the bottom of the box where the roll-up door is all the way down to the floor. The roll-up door has a locking mechanism, and it has a latch that actually goes through the steel frame, and I actually had to notch out the 2x4 to allow for that latch to actually slide past the 2x4 so it would work properly. Okay, so this is the lumber that we're going to use to make our faux columns, and basically it's a 2x8, a 2x6, and then a 2x3. Z has already stained the lumber and also distressed it, so it's going to match the rest of the faux beams that we actually installed in the workshop. So the faux beams and the faux columns will kind of match each other. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip them to the widths, the proper widths, and then I'm going to join them together with pocket holes, and the column will make a U shape, and then we'll place the column over the nailer that I just installed and fasten it to the wall. So I'm going to rip down everything to the proper width so I can start the glue up and start popping in some pocket holes and get the faux columns built. These are built just like the faux beams that I had built in a previous video, and I'll leave a link in the description here to that video. And then once I get the columns built, then I can take and screw them into the nailer that I installed on each side of the roll-up door. And again, I think I'm using 3.5 inch wood screws to screw through the faux column and then into the 2x nailer that we have fixed to the metal framing of the garage roll-up door track. I'm using my Bosch laser level because the column extends above the roll-up door cover, and then I'm going to take the faux column wood and rip it down to the small lengths that I'll need to construct 2 small columns, faux columns that will go on top of the roll-up door cover. And these are going to be made just like the larger columns that I installed below the roll-up door cover, and they're actually going to go fairly quickly, and then I'll install those above the roll-up door cover. And you can see here that I'm using some just 2x nailers on each side of the air pipe here, and then once I get the nailers in place, then I can just slide the faux column over and then screw the faux column to the 2x nailers that I'm screwing to the wall here. And now with the shorter faux columns installed, I can move on to phase 4 of this project, which is going to be building the barn doors that are going to cover up the roll-up door and should complete the accent wall for the workshop. Okay, so now as you can probably see behind me, the west wall, which is the accent wall of the workshop, is for the most part complete. The wall is completely trimmed out. The cover for the roll-up door is constructed, installed, and trimmed out. The only thing left to do now is to build the two barn doors that are going to cover up the actual overhead door, which you see behind me. So I've measured the rough opening, and now I'm going to construct the two barn doors. I'm going to frame them with just 2x3 framing, and then I'm going to use the T111 siding for the face of the doors, and then I'm going to trim those out in the same trim as I trimmed out the wall. So let's get started cutting out the framing for the barn doors. So here I'm going to start cutting down the 2x3 framing to the proper lengths that I'll need to frame the two barn doors, and then just take and screw them together and just make sure that everything is square as I'm screwing all these corners together. And then I'm going to go in and install a center horizontal support. I believe these doors were about 52 inches wide by 8 feet tall. And then once I got them framed up, I put them in the opening just to make sure that I had the dimensions and everything sized correctly, to make sure that I'm going to have the proper gap around the door. Once I did that, I laid them back on the floor and cut my T111 siding, and then started installing the T111 siding on the face of the doors. Now, as you can see here, you know, a T111 siding is 4 feet by 8, and the door was, like I said, maybe 52 inches wide. So what I did is I split the difference on both ends, and then I'll take and scab a small piece on either side of the door. This joint is not going to really be seen because the trim around the door is going to cover it up. Now, one thing I did have to do, I had been primarily using 1x4 trim throughout the entire workshop, but here, in order to cover that seam, I had to go with 1x6 trim. And to be honest, when I laid it out and looked at it, due to the size of the doors, I think the 1x6 trim aesthetically just looks much better than if I would have used the 1x4 trim. And you can see once it's complete, I think the 1x6 was the right call here. And then once I got the T111 siding installed, I do what I always do, is break out the Minwax Golden Pecan and go ahead and get it stained. And again, this is the same stain used throughout the entire workshop, and it should match perfect with the existing walls that are already in place. And then once I get this stained, then I can start trimming it out. But one thing to add too is the reason I use 2x3 trim, or I'm sorry, 2x3 framing, is because I'm going to go back and insulate the back side of these doors. Home Depot was out of the 2-inch rigid insulation, so I just bought some 1-inch and then just doubled up on it. And you'll notice I'm applying it so the reflective backing is facing out. Down in Florida, this really helps with the radiant heat and basically reflects it back out of the workshop. And I've seen a considerable difference in the heat inside the workshop now that pretty much all the rigid insulation is installed. I still haven't installed the Mr. Cool unit, but just having the insulation, I can tell a big difference. And now I'm going to start installing the 1x4 trim, which is going to go basically around the perimeter of the door. And once I get the 1x4 trim done around the perimeter of the door, then I'm going to turn the door over and start installing the face trim. And I'm using 1x6 for the face trim, like I had mentioned earlier, to cover up the seams that are located on both sides of the door. Along with putting the 6-inch trim down both sides of the door, I'm also going to install it on the top and bottom, and then also I'm going to install a piece in the center, and then have two pieces at a 45 just to give it that barn door feel. And I think they turned out really great, better than I expected. And once I get them installed, it just really completes the workshop renovation. And this is sort of what I've been building toward for the last 4 to 6 months. So when I installed the 45-degree trim pieces, where the two trim pieces come together there at the middle of the door, that's going to be where the door handle is going to be. And then on the opposite side will be the hinge side of the door, and that will be where I install 3 hinges, because these are pretty heavy doors. I did have to modify the overhead door and cut off the door latches because they were going to interfere with the closing of the barn door, but I'm still able to operate the latches, so that's not a problem. So now that I have the doors completed and have them in the rough opening, I'm using 1/8" shims just to shim up to get the proper distance or the proper gap around the door, and then I broke out my Bosch laser level just to level horizontal and vertical, so I'm able to install the hinges. And I also installed 2 barrel bolts at the tops of the door just to be able to secure them in the closed position. And then I installed the door handles on each side of the door as well, and that pretty much completed the barn door installation. And you can see here with the doors open, I didn't finish the back side of the doors because that has the reflective insulation on them. But you can see here the roll-up door operates perfect. There's no issues. It rolls up just like it would normally roll up. So I'm able to utilize that. I'll be able to back my truck up, take off all my sheet goods and put them directly on my table saw or my outfeed table, or just leave them in the bed of the truck, and as I rip them, just take them off one piece at a time. And then I can close the door, and the latches on each side of the door still work perfectly. And then I can just shut the barn door, and it's as if there's not even a roll-up door there. I think this project exceeded my expectations, and it was a really gratifying project to do. And I would highly advise, if you've got a similar situation, to maybe take on a project like this. You'll get a lot of gratification from it. And as you can see, it just completes the entire workshop renovation project that I've been working on for the last 4 to 6 months. And I think it looks great. I'm still going to do other stuff, but for now, I think I'm at a point where I can start working on other things. So you might have noticed that I had some exposed Romex. So this here is basically the completed wall, the entire wall, from starting over on the right hand side with the electrical chase, which was part of phase 1 of the project. And then you can see the black conduit in the outlet boxes around the refrigerator. I did go ahead and install and trim out the electrical. And then I also trimmed out the rest of the wall. And then you've got the barn door and the roll-up cover for the roll-up door, and the faux columns. All in all, I think this was a great project. I'd highly recommend tackling a project like this. And there's the conduit for the air compressor, and I think I've got 3 or 4 outlets on this side of the wall as well. So like I said, I'm very happy to basically put this project behind me, put it in the rear view, and move on to bigger and better things. Like anything else, when it drags out, it kind of gets a little boring and a little repetitious. But as you can see, the entire workshop is 100% complete, and it all blends in together. And I am going to go back and paint the white doors black. And I think once I do that, you'll never be able to tell that this was a metal building or that this is a metal building. It just looks like a wooden rustic barn from the inside. So I'm very happy with it, and I hope you guys are too. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it helps you out in your project. If it did, please leave it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions regarding what I did, or you simply have questions about your own shop project, then please leave them in the comments section below and I'll get them answered. Now get out there and create, build, and inspire, and as always, pay it forward. This is Rick with the Ingrain Workshop, signing out. We'll see you next time, and please share. Thanks for watching.